Это книга «Исповедь экономического убийцы», и Джона Перкинса, автора этой книги, который имеет очень богатый жизненный опыт и был в свое время активистом, и написал множество книг, и преподает, и встречается с людьми. Мы видим в Казахстане впервые, поэтому мы не могли упустить эту возможность. So I've introduced you and said that it's unique opportunity for us to talk to you here in Astana. I believe it's your first visit to Kazakhstan, and you are here a few days, and I saw yesterday, I believe, on your Facebook page that you was impressed by what you see in Astana. So we are happy that you're impressed, and let's talk about some impressions from this part of the world, maybe more global issues, crises, and what we can expect from the next maybe years, decades, because what we learned from your books, that it's tough to predict what will happen, but we need to understand the influence of economists and corporations, and because of that we can understand the world better. So my first question is about your book. You just wrote second version or new book of confession of the hitman, economic hitman. Why you wrote second version? Why you wrote this second part?
Well, first of all, I want to apologize that I don't speak Russian or Kazakh. I wish I did. I'm glad you speak English. Maybe next time I come, I'll learn some. But 12 years after Confessions of an Economic Hitman came out, I thought really needed to describe the changes that had happened in the world, and also a whole new section, 15 chapters about what we can do to create a better world. Because since the time I was an economic hitman back in the 1970s, things have just transformed radically. In those days, my job was really to identify countries that had resources our corporations wanted, like oil, for example. You could be here with oil or whatever. Yeah. And then to arrange huge loans from the World Bank or its sister organizations to that country. And incidentally, about 2 hours ago, I met with your Prime Minister, who had just come out of a meeting with the World Bank, and he asked me what advice I had. I said, be careful. And so my job was to identify countries with resources our corporations wanted, get loans for them from the World Bank, large loans that never went to the country, actually, that went to U.S. corporations to build big infrastructure projects in the country, power plants, industrial parks, highways, things that benefited our corporations because they made big profits. Also helped a few wealthy families in those countries, the families that own the industries and the commercial establishments. But everybody else suffered because money was diverted from education, healthcare, and other social services to pay the interest on the loans. And in the end, the loans could never be repaid. And so we'd go back, economic hitmen, and say, hey, since you can't pay your loans, sell your resource, oil, real cheap to our corporations without any environmental or social regulations. Or vote with us on the next United Nations vote. You know, vote with us against the Soviet Union, whatever. Allow us to build a military base on your soil. And in the few cases where I failed, where presidents of countries wouldn't accept these loans, people we called the jackals went in. And these were CIA people who either overthrew governments or assassinated them. Two of my clients, Jaime Roldosa, president of Ecuador, and Omar Torrijos, head of state of Panama, because they didn't agree with me. They didn't buy the system I wanted them to buy. They were assassinated. They died in bad plane crashes. They were presidential planes. And the United States has unfortunately admitted that it's unfortunate that it did these things to taking out Salvador Allende of Chile, Mossadegh of Iran, Lumumba of the Congo. You know, so we have this history. So that was in the 1970s, and that's what I wrote about in the first book. But after that, as I traveled more around the world and met with people, I began to see how what we really needed to do is talk about how that's really come home to hit all of us. So that system is now being used against people in the United States, Europe, everywhere, in its own way. So, but the whole role of economic hitmen has expanded. So now that system is based on debt and fear. And so now we live in a world where there's a great deal of debt. In the United States, for example, student loans, student debt, it's terrible. And healthcare debt, credit card debt. People have tremendous debt. When people have debt, they don't dare stand up to the system. They don't want to change. They want to just go out and pay off their debts. And also fear. So, you know, we in the United States are bombarded by fear of Russia, fear of terrorism, it's all their fault, not our fault. Everything that's wrong in the world is somebody else, and we've got to build up a big military system, and Trump really represents that in a big way. And incidentally, I was very impressed in St. Petersburg at the International Economic Forum there, with President Putin and Secretary General of the United Nations, Guterres, were both there also. And they both talked, as your president does here, about the need to really address climate change and world poverty, and inequality, and these sorts of things, to develop a new economic system that actually can measure those things rather than just the way we currently measure GNP, which is by consumption of goods, destroying the earth, really. So I realized during this period that what people like me, economic hitmen, over the years, we've created something that I call, we've turned capitalism into a very predatory form. I'm not against capitalism, but ever since Milton Friedman won the Nobel Prize in 1976 and made the statement, the only responsibility of business is to maximize profits regardless of social and environmental costs, things have really gone downhill. We've created what I call a death economy that's based on fear, warfare, huge budgets in the United States and elsewhere spent on defense, on killing people. And our corporations destroy the very resources upon which they depend, digging up, ravaging the earth. And so it became very clear to me that I have a 9-year-old grandson. And for him and all of his brothers and sisters living here in Kazakhstan or in Russia or in China or India or wherever, in order for them to inherit a world that they're going to want to have, we've got to change the system. We've got to create a new form of capitalism, a new economic system, one that I call a life economy, which can be based on cleaning up pollution. For example, hiring companies to, instead of making missiles, let these big technological companies find ways to mine the plastic that's floating in the oceans, clean up all the oil that's spilled around the planet, do other things, and regenerate destroyed environments, fill in old mine pits and so on and so forth, and create new technologies for energy, transportation, communications, that don't ravage the earth, that don't plunder, that don't tear up the earth, but instead create a renewable resource. In other words, a system that's a renewable resource. And I think we're in the process of making that happen. My few days here in Kazakhstan, I've been here, I think this is my 4th day now. I've got a little jet lag, and I've had a wonderful, wonderful tour of your magnificent city by Professor Byzakov, who's an economist and has been such a good host, and also meeting with the Prime Minister today and many other people. What I've seen here is a system, a society, a country that is really looking toward the future. The city itself, Astana, is so futuristic, and the Expo 217 is about energy, amongst other things. So I'm very impressed by the fact that this conference is being held here. I just answered it was a long answer to a short question.
It's fine, but yeah. But my second question is about our country and countries like our. You understand that Astana is a very futuristic and good-looking city, but you understand also that Astana is the capital of the country with a lot of contracts with corporations, and our economy growth based on these contracts and on this system of network of connections with biggest corporations in the world, like Chevron and many others. What can country do in this situation when it's a rich oil country like Kazakhstan, or it's a small and not a very rich country like some of neighbors of Kazakhstan in this region or in other part of the world? What can they do?
It's a great question, and I think you can do a lot. Mm-hmm. Corporations run the world. The United States is run by corporations.
Yeah.
And we've known that for some time, but it's become very obvious under Trump. He's big corporations. He's making a lot of money, his family, his corporations. Corporations run the world. And they've really created this global empire, and mm-hmm. economic hitmen like me did this. I carry a lot of guilt, so I need to redeem myself by changing things, And yet corporations are just people. Mm-hmm. And they've been driven during recent decades by this one principle: maximize profits regardless of the social and environmental costs. But that doesn't have to be the goal of corporations. So what I advocate is to have corporations reset their goal to make a decent rate of return for investors. That's very, very important. But only invest in things that are going to create a life economy, mm-hmm. that are going to create a sustainable economy, and one that cleans up pollution, regenerates destroyed environments, gets new technologies, solar and wind, which you're doing a lot with here in this country. But, I think 10 years from now, we're going to look back at the solar technology of today and say, boy, was that ancient. Yeah. That was like using a stone axe. Mm-hmm. We keep evolving. And so I think for all of us here, and I think Kazakhstan as a country and all of us as individuals, we all support corporations one way or another. We either work for them, or we manage them, we own them, and we all consume, don't we? I mean, I don't see anybody sitting out there naked. You got clothes, you probably bought them from a corporation. I doubt if you made your own. I'm not very good at making neckties. I'm not even very good at wearing them. I should be like you. So we all support corporations. And I spend a lot of time with corporate executives. I speak at a lot of corporate conferences. I advise corporate executives. I find over and over again that they want to create a better world. I so frequently hear from corporate CEOs and CFOs, I have children or grandchildren. I want to make a better world, but I'm afraid that if I lose 0.5% of market share or some profits, my major shareholders will fire me. Mm-hmm. and replace me with someone who only cares about market share. So they tell me, I was recently told this by the president of Nike Corporation, Mark Parker. He said something very much like that, and he said, Phil Knight, who owns the most stock, will fire me if I don't keep profits up. So what I want is for every one of you, he said, tell everybody you talk to, write me an email. Mm-hmm. It's easy. Send me an email saying, I love Nike, but I'm not going to buy anymore until you pay your workers a living wage in Indonesia or wherever you've got factories. I don't know whether there are any here or not, but
no.
Okay, good. And I think, we can do that with all these corporations, because then the CEO says, if I have 100,000 emails, I can take that to Phil Knight or whoever the top owner is and say, hey, we've got to listen to our customers. And so, or if we're investors in corporations, or if we work for corporations, I think to keep telling these corporations, look, we love your products, don't make them the bad guy, but we want to help you be successful in the future, and to be successful in the future, you've got to start supporting a life economy. You've got to be part of this change system. And I've got to say, I know so many chief executive officers that want to see this happen.
So for us as ordinary people, it's the only possible way to communicate to these corporations and say them that we want you work better, or we can do something more.
Well, I think we can get all of our social networking people to do the same thing. So I don't want to pick on Nike, but I'll keep on that subject. So you send an email to Nike and say, hey, I just was in one of your stores, but I didn't buy your product because you don't pay your workers a fair wage. I want to help you. I want to buy your product, pay your workers a better wage, and send that to Nike, but also send it to everybody on your social networking circle. Mm-hmm. Ask them to send it to Nike, and ask them to send it to everybody in their social networking circle. And do it every week. I think through social network, we have tremendous power. If I look at the impact that consumer movements have had in the past, they're huge. Mm-hmm. So in the United States, back when I was in college, there was apartheid in South Africa, terrible racial discrimination. Yeah. We boycotted corporations that supported it or threatened to boycott it. We didn't even have to boycott them, just threaten, send them letters. Mm-hmm. And the rivers were terribly polluted. And we got corporations to clean them up. Mm-hmm. We got corporations to open their doors wider to women and minorities. Consumer movements are very, very powerful. And I think now we need to go beyond the specific issues of clean rivers or these sorts of things and say, there's a bigger issue, and that's your overall goal. And your goal should be make a decent rate of return for your investors, but only invest in things that are going to serve us, the public, that will serve the world. At the session I was just at, panel session, one of the speakers mentioned how if you're a small corporation, you really need to serve your investors. If you're worth, let's say, $1 million, mm-hmm. But if you're worth $1 billion, you need to take a greater responsibility and say you've got to not just serve your investors, but you've got to serve the larger public. So I think we all need to insist that these corporations that we support in one way or another support us, mm-hmm. serve a public. And so, you could pick any corporation, Monsanto, Texaco, Chevron, pick Chevron, Nike, whatever, but if everybody in this room starts to pick one corporation, we all have to pick the same one, we can all pick a different one. But send them an email every week and send it to everybody you know and ask them to send it to everybody they know. And that, it has a huge impact.
But why the situation in the world is getting better or worse at the moment, as you said before, and that was a reason why you wrote your second book, second version or new part of the book. Why? We have all this social media, we have new influence, new power in our hands, but situation in the world getting worse and worse, according to you. What's happening?
Well, because people, since this trend began quite a long time ago, but it really hit in 1976 mm-hmm. when Milton Friedman won the Nobel Prize, and this whole idea of the only responsibility of business is to maximize profits. Ronald Reagan, President of the United States, just supported this 100%. Margaret Thatcher, leaders around the world, and ever since they've been doing that. So this idea that all you got to do is make profits and don't worry about people, don't worry about nature, that just make profits and everything will take care of itself, and it's not working. We're seeing that it's not working. But it's been building and building and building, and it's got this momentum, and now it's hard for executives not to follow that edict, because that's what they're taught in business school, that's what their shareholders expect. Mm-hmm. But it's a perception. We need to turn around. I think it's really important to understand that there's really two realities. There's objective reality, this microphone. Mm-hmm. And there's a perceived reality, the words we're speaking through this microphone. And basically, human activities are controlled by perceived reality. Yeah. So there's no culture, there's no religion, there's no economics, there's no corporations except as we perceive them. There's no Kazakhstan, there's no United States, there's no China, there's no Russia, except we have a perception. And when enough people accept the perception or it's made into law, then it becomes an objective reality. So we've been operating under perception that the only way to have a successful corporation is to have one that maximizes profits mm-hmm. and doesn't care what it does to people or the earth. That perception has created a reality, which is now taking us on this fragile space station called Earth, it's navigating, that reality is navigating us toward disaster. If we change the perception, we change the navigation. And then we change the reality. And we can move into a new reality, which is a reality that my 9-year-old grandson is going to want to inherit in 6 decades when he's my age, more or less. And I think it's really important to understand that perceptions can change very quickly.
Yeah.
And I think you here in Kazakhstan are really understand that. You know, it was really interesting to me to have been in St. Petersburg at the economic conference there, some forum there. And I'd say that St. Petersburg is a jewel of the historical world. The palaces, the art, I mean, beautiful, beautiful jewel city, but it's a jewel of the past. And now come to Astana to another economic conference, and in a way, Astana is a jewel of the future.
Yeah, it's interesting.
You know, I arrived here at 5 o'clock in the morning from St. Petersburg, and as I'm driving in, I'm looking at the city, and I'd seen pictures, but it didn't compare with what is this? I feel like I'm on another planet, a planet of the future. And then as I spent more time over the next several days and talked to people and got to know the city and hung out and walked along the river at night when there's all these young people out there, people playing music, and you know, the feeling I got was beautiful. That there's an atmosphere here, there's an attitude, there's a character to this city that is defining the future. And I'm sure there's plenty of problems if you live here. Human beings create problems, but it's a very exciting place to be, and it's a very exciting comparison to make 2 international economic conferences, one in St. Petersburg, one in Astana, and the difference in the cities, both beautiful cities in their own way, but in very, very different ways.
Do you have any examples of corporations or countries who are changed a lot or who can be best example for countries like Kazakhstan, who are just growing, who are just started 25 years ago of their own way to the future?
Yeah, I think, I have to say, and I hate to have to say this, but I think the United States really failed the world. I think after the Soviet Union ended in 1991, when this country became independent, the United States had an opportunity to do great things, to promote democracy and a nice form of capitalism, but we didn't do a very good job at it at all. We promoted this selfish form of predatory capitalism. And yet the United States was a superpower. It didn't have any challengers for a long time, but it didn't do a good job. Now we've got Russia reemerging. It's a very powerful entity. China, India, and so there's this competition now, which I think is very healthy, actually. And Afghanistan is, Kazakhstan, I have Afghanistan in mind because it's a very big issue to me of what the United States is doing there. I'm very upset about what goes on. Kazakhstan is right in the middle of the idea of the new Silk Road, the One Belt, One Road. You're in a wonderful position to take advantage of what's happening in China, Russia, Turkey, India, European Union. And you're doing it, you're creating this vision of the future. I think it's very, very beautiful, this idea that's evolving. And the economists in this country that I've been talking to, and the Prime Minister, and there's a paper I read by your president, which really looks into this. So I think here's an example here of moving into some new ideas. From another standpoint, I was recently in the small island country of Aruba, in the Caribbean. And they have the most amazing water system in the world. It's all salt water. They have a system for converting salt water into incredible drinking water, what I call the champagne of water. It's incredible. They're taking a leadership role in how countries that don't have good drinking water can create out of salt water. That doesn't work in Kazakhstan, I don't think, because you don't have an ocean nearby. But and if you look at Costa Rica is taking a real leadership role in saving its environment. Ecuador, small country in South America, has the first constitution ever written in the world that gives inalienable rights to nature. So nature theoretically has the same rights as human beings, and they can go on and on. I think a lot of the emerging countries are taking a very strong role and seeing that that countries like the United States have failed to do this. So it's happening, and I think Kazakhstan has a great role to play in this. And the fact that you have this summit here, this forum, is phenomenal. And I know you have several others. There's a Eurasian summit coming up here, and you've got the Expo 2017. So it seems to me that a country like Kazakhstan really has the opportunity to sell a new vision, a vision of the future. And it's symbolized by this city. And that's a powerful role. And you're in a powerful position geographically also to make that happen.
Yeah, and at the same time, you understand that we do not have access to the oceans, to these seaways, and it's same on the same time. It's
challenging.
Yeah, it's very challenging, but
that makes it all the more important.
Yeah.
Because if it were easy, what's the point?
Yeah.
Because it's challenging and you're doing it.
Yeah, we love challenges in this part of the world. My last question, and then we will go to the audience, is a question about your forecast or prediction. What will be with the world in maybe a few years, maybe a few decades? I don't know what you want to predict, how you can respond to that. But because Mr. Taleb, who sit there in your chair just a couple of years ago, he said that he cannot predict anything. Maybe you can predict what will be with our world in the future.
Well, I cannot predict, but I can offer hope and my belief. So my belief is that we will create a life economy, an economic system where instead of paying General Dynamics or Raytheon in the United States to make missiles, to make weapons to kill people, we pay them to make equipment to clean up pollution, clean up the oceans, clean up the oil spills, clean up the air. And we pay other companies to, instead of digging mines, to fill in the mines and create greenhouses to grow food on top of the mines. And we move into even greater technologies of creating energy from the air, which we know we can do, and solar and so forth. So your national symbol includes the sun. I mean, that's phenomenal. So I think moving into this life economy, I believe that's going to happen. I believe it is happening. The alternative is dire. I think if we don't do that, we heard in this morning's panel, which was about instability or stability, uncertainty, that I heard a lot of discussions about the short term, how the global economy is growing now. We've come out of a period of recession and instability, and it seems to be stable. People seem very happy. But that's short term. That can't continue, I don't think, unless we continue to change our view of the economy and have a systemic change toward this economy that's not destructive of itself. And if we don't do that, we're going to be in serious trouble. I don't know exactly what that'll look like, and I don't want to know what it will look like. I don't want my grandson to have to go through that. So I think that we're smart enough as human beings to go through this new revolution that we're in. I think we're in the greatest revolution in history. All of us out here, we're in a consciousness revolution where we're waking up to what it means to be human on this planet. And I believe that, look at these faces out here. See a lot of amazing people, young people, older people, and there's a role for all of us in this, and it's an incredibly exciting time. So my belief is that we will persevere, that human beings have gone through a lot of crises. You know, we went through World War I, World War II, the Depression in between, Soviet occupation. You've been through a lot. You've been through a lot. The history of Kazakhstan is filled with challenges. So here's another one. This is a really exciting one.
So we will see you quite often if you will write a book about Kazakhstan, I believe.
Invite me back every year.
Okay,
I'd love to come.
we will do, and thank you for this opportunity to talk to you. It was pleasure and honor for me and for all of us to see you here.
It's my honor, my pleasure. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.